Hi, Rich. I know other people also watch these videos, so I'll explain what I talked to you today, but also for other people that may watch. Since we started talking today about pivots, continuous pivots, and particularly the natural pivot, I'll make several videos rather than try to cover all the points in one. There are just so many things to think about and so many things to practice till you get this organized. There's also very many ways to talk about teaching pivots, so I'll try to cover as many different aspects as I can to do that. One thing I want to talk about that I've sometimes seen people try to do is practice pivots with their knees together. I don't know where that has come from, but I've seen people trying to do that down the floor, and of course that isn't going to work. We're dancing a natural pivot. My partner has their leg in between mine, so we are going to have a connection in the upper part of the right thigh throughout the pivots. Now if I use a rise on the end as I would in a spin turn, then the lady's leg will move out into the brushing action. I lead a brush as a man by putting a rise on an action where the feet are coming towards each other, and I want to rise to where my lady can feel her legs coming together enough to create the brush. We will not do that on a series of consecutive pivots. And we were talking about pivots today in the waltz. Now we don't necessarily have what we call rise in those pivots, but we might call it a lilt. And that is with the swing action of the body, the releasing of the weight rolling through the foot as we go from the heel to the toe. There can be a lilting action in the pivots, which is not the same as that true rise that we would have on the spin turn. We could do a series of pivots with a spin turn ending, in which case we might rise to lead the lady to do a brush. So today what we'll do is describe the pivot, which is the backward end of the pivots, and the pivoting action, which is the forward part. We'll talk a little bit about the way the technique is written in the Imperial book, The Technique of Ballroom Dancing. Two things that I think are confusing, and now we have different opinions about the technique book. Some people don't like it at all, and they think it leads people on the wrong path because there's not enough information. And others say, well, if you know how to read it, then it is truly accurate. But let me just describe two things that could get you in trouble. So let's talk about the gentleman first, if he's going back in the spin turn, which is the place where we have a pivot described, and pivoting action is the spin turn. We also have the natural pivot, which is in the quick step chart and in the waltz chart, and that is simply the backward end of the pivot. And from there we could do, let's say in quick step, a quarter turn to the right. We would not have to complete it with the spin turn. They're describing the left foot back with toe turned in. Now, it's true that when we accomplish a turn and prepare a turn, because our legs need to remain parallel in our hips, our pelvis needs to turn. We actually are feeling, if I just stood here, we are feeling like we're doing this. And we're using the rotators under the big glute muscles there. It feels like they're turning in. Why is that? It's because as we're shaping our turn, in order to remain parallel, I will feel that my left thigh is turned in. Now my foot will be, let's say in an organized fashion, turning in with that leg. I don't think that it's noticeable at all. Some people read that and actually try to do something extreme with their foot. So let's just say that there's a sense of the thigh having an inward rotation, right? Because it's not just a matter of holding the parallel, you actually have to feel the shaping of the leg. Now you notice that I'm making space for my girl. So when we say back, or the technique says back, I do have CBM, or have contra body movement. So my track is curving and I'm moving out of the track of the lady. So there always has to be space between the thighs for our partner. We cannot have the thighs together. It will go directly straight back without any adjustment. So if you see where my body is, and my feet in relation, it is back, but it has more of a feeling of moving to the side. Now that can be carried too far. I do see sometimes people just doing this as the man into the pivot. So you've got to get the right amount of backward and the right amount of opening. Just imagine you're always dancing with a fat partner. You dance with a fat lady, lady dances with a fat man, because there always needs to be more space in the upper thighs than we imagine. The pivot itself then is done on the ball of the foot with the heel lowering towards the floor as the weight is transferred. At the moment that the heel arrives to the floor, then your turn will be finished through your feet. So if I dump my weight into the heel, I won't be able to pivot. On the other hand, if I turn and don't come down, I'm going to fall into the next part. So you will be using a toe, heel, toe. Now that indicates that my heel touches the ground and then I'll come out through the front of the foot. So that's the pivot itself. Now the other thing that's confusing in the technique book, it describes that the right leg is held in CBMP. This is an important aspect of the difference between the pivot and the pivoting action, where the leg swings open and you lose the CBMP. But it's not truly the CBMP the way we normally see it. That normally refers to the position of the feet where you're on a line, where your heel is in line with your toe. Now I cannot actually literally be in that position and still have a lady's leg or gentleman's leg in the middle. But what that is telling us is that the leg remains connected to the partner, and as we turn, the legs will not open. So I think that can be a little bit misleading, so I'd like to explain that. So if you're looking in the book, say, well, there's no way that can be in CBMP. It can't literally be there. So just understand the difference between holding the leg, let's say like a compass. If this was my pencil, then I would be inscribing a circle on the floor. So the step out of the pivot then, when I'm moving forward, will be taken on the heel. The pivoting action then, we're going to roll through the foot from heel to ball to toe, and we're going to kick the ball with the left foot. If you hold this leg behind you, again, this is the way it would be written. This would be described as back and slightly to the side. It's very important that you know how it arrives back and slightly to the side. If I hold the leg here, my axis is going to stay here, and I'm not going to be able to move around my lady. So what happens if I do this in slow motion? I'll begin to kick the ball around the corner. Around the corner because I have the intention to turn. So it starts as a forward swing. And we've talked about that before, that most of our side steps are started as a forward swing, and they become side as turn is accomplished to the feet. So I'm kicking the ball, I'm dancing with the fat partner, so I have room between my legs. As I'm arriving through the ball of this foot, and the leg is still swinging into the kick, it goes through sideways and gradually becomes back and slightly to the side because it's open for my partner to step in between. And then, so if I'm dancing a spin turn, for instance, that's where I would dance my brush. If we were going to continue on into another pivot, then the pivoting action will turn into a pivot. So I'll do this again in slow motion so we can see the forward becoming side and slightly back. That then becomes a pivot. So I'm moving forward, kicking the ball, rolling to the toe, going through side, going to side and slightly back. Now, as I'm transferring my weight here, I'm going to talk about the man. The man is going to use the heel of his foot. That's going to become the next pivot and will be followed by another pivoting action. Now, I think even for the ladies, this is a good way to start. Because of the swing of the dance in waltz and because of the lilt, she has a slightly different footwork than the man. But we're not going to talk about that now. We're going to stick to really the fundamentals of using the pivot and the pivoting action. On a later video, we'll talk about who's on the outside and who's on the inside. and how we help each other with doing that. Okay, but first we need to understand not to lock the legs, not to try to overly turn the foot in. It's not literally held in CBMP, and the action of the pivot is very different from the pivoting action because of the free leg swinging open. So it's the element of the forward swing and the element of the forward swing becoming side, becoming back, and slightly side that seems to give most people trouble on the forward half. And on the back half, it seems like the normal problem is dumping onto the heel right away. Now, I'm tempted to say a lot more about taking turns and how you're going to help your partner around, but I think that's enough for this first video because we've really got to get those two elements. So you can work up to doing a half a turn on each of them, and then just say do 2 pivots. So that would be back, forward, and just see how you do with that. And then we'll come back and talk about some of the dynamics of accelerating our partner and accelerating ourselves and how we're going to use the frame, and a little bit more about using the feet. There's more we can talk about. So let's leave it at that for now, and we'll be back with more information.